Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Sarah, and today we're going to be talking about heart disease with Harry Serpanos because he has some profoundly life-changing information for you about reversing the damage that a heart attack can cause in the myocardium, as well as helping to clear calcium out of the arteries. Harry's a polymath and cartographer, and there are times in the interview, I'm not being rude, I've just moved him on a bit because he's profoundly intelligent and knowledgeable, and he has the capacity to really blow your minds. So he's going to be talking to you today about practical daily life applications of certain supplements to help, especially if you've had a heart attack or you've got a lot of cardiovascular markers. So I'll hand you over to Harry now. And Harry, would you like to introduce yourself for people that don't know you? Maybe say a bit about your background, and then we'll dive into what you're going to teach us today.
Okay. Well, my name's Harry Serpanos. I reside in Hobart, Tasmania, which is a state of Australia in the Southern Hemisphere. And about 12 years ago, approximately, I'm 56 now, but 12 years ago I was 44. And I ended up having cardiovascular disease. So that was an interesting sort of thing to happen to me, especially when my father was didn't have any health ailments whatsoever, was old and had no issues. It was just sort of why me? I think everybody asks that sort of stuff. You still feel a bit sorry for yourself initially, then you get over it. I was an ex-smoker in the past, so I thought it was actually cancer because I had shortness of breath. And they said, no, you've got an irregular heart beat. There's something there, and we've actually found in your blood also the signs that there's been some sort of incident. Now, I did have an incident the previous day where I really felt so tired. I had to sit down. I just nearly passed out. Maybe I was having a heart attack at that time. That's why they actually found what they found in my bloodstream the next day. And, once it still basically gives me goosebumps and all that. It's a very uncomfortable thing. It's probably the reason why I haven't made a video on it yet, because it was a very traumatic event in my life. I nearly got pretty much that close to death.
Yeah, definitely. That's kind of massively. Thank you for sharing something so personal with us. So, just to, before we dive into what you're going to teach us today, just to lighten it a little bit, have you ever met a famous person?
Um, well, I could say the closest to fame would be a minister of the Greek government who was my uncle. so I do have so that's probably the only famous person that I can think of as a Greek politician.
Because I think you're kind of known as a polymath as well, so so that people can get a feel for what's going to happen today in the interview. What are you going to teach us, and what are we going to learn? And then I'll just be quiet and let you share your massive amount of knowledge with us.
Yeah, well, I'll just go through my story and I'll sort of elaborate and go into these sort of subject matters, and then you can sort of ask me in between that then it becomes a bit more interactive and interesting. So rather than a monologue that I have a tendency of doing sometimes when I get passionate about something and I'm trying to explain it, but at the same time, it's important that things get nuanced as well, because sometimes you can miss a lot of details when you do that. After a year, I basically said to myself, I'm going to fight this. I'm going to find a solution. I went through the normal sort of the program that the hospital provides, which is just ridiculous. You walk in and it's all junk food and how to eat it and how to basically read labels. Absolutely ridiculous. And I just realized these people have got no idea. I went to one session, that was it. I never went back because I realized just there, I said, well, this is basically, you really have to have an extremely low IQ or be very brainwashed to actually even give it any time to this nonsense. It was quite clear to me that these people have got no idea. I mean, even the doctor at least was honest enough to say, well, we don't know what causes it. We've got some ideas, but they've never been established properly with experiments.
And that would be heart attacks and strokes and cardiac.
Exactly.
But even the doctors said that we don't have any idea why this has happened, and you were just given just rubbish or child food to eat. And were you told eat less and move more by any chance?
That was at that session that was actually done by some dietitian, with a nurse showing some of the labels, walking around with some of the stuff, the paraphernalia, and it was just nonsense all the way through. And when I found an opportunity to leave, I left.
So people can get a feel for where you were at, what kind of blood markers, or
I'll give you an example. I'll give you
any kind of body. Yeah.
My even though I know that I'm an ApoE33, which I tend to not to be a hyper-responder. So it's irrelevant unless you're a 4-4, you've got that type of genetics, then you're going to be more likely to be a hyper-responder than anything else. So my sort of cholesterol was in the sort of total cholesterol around the 4.5 millimole at the time. When I actually had the heart condition, I was about 4.2. When I actually went low carb, it actually got down to even 3.2. So where other people go low carb and it goes through the roof, it's just the genetics. So, I mean, people just need to realize that that's, irrelevant.
A red herring.
It's a red herring. It's associated. It's not causal. Something that's associated is no different than ice cream sales at Miami Beach and shark attacks. It's associated. It's nothing other than that. Experimentally, it's never been proven. And so it's pretty much irrelevant in my opinion. And I started realizing that, and I initially, about 11 years ago, I actually came across the Western A. Price Foundation, saw some of their stuff, Oiling of America. At that time, I didn't realize about deuterium, and I didn't realize how high the levels of deuterium are in seed oils, as high as, I'll give you an example, they can get as high as 255 parts per million.
Yeah, and for people who don't know what deuterium is, it's heavy hydrogen, and it basically goes down your mitochondria or the ATPase and breaks it like an adult playing on kids' toys. And
precisely
anything below 180, anything 180 and above is. We all agree, scientists, doctors agree, it's really bad. And the safe
zone is 130.
Yeah, I was going to say, or 120 is even better. Yeah. So yes.
Yeah. So the thing is, people need to realize now, we don't want to, because you still need some deuterium for collagen. So structures, give collagen structures rigidity. You get some level of proton tunneling, but getting back to my sort of at the time is I didn't realize that was actually the big driver, because my blood sugars, were never pre-diabetic or diabetic. They were between the 5 and 6 millimoles. So they weren't like in extreme levels or anything like that. It was primarily, I did consume some carbohydrates, a mixed diet, but it was more potatoes and stuff like that. And with other foods. But the big one was I cooked everything in seed oils, because I'd actually be convinced by the medical system that, this was going to be protective of the heart and all that sort of stuff. So I was sort of gung-ho all that. I had plenty of arguments with other people over, between olive oil and that, even with my father. Dad uses olive oil. He's 88 and didn't have a heart attack or stroke or anything like that.
Did your father smoke though? Because I just wanted to backtrack, because you mentioned that you used to smoke. He did
smoke a bit.
People might want to know, when did you quit smoking? Was it like 20 years before the heart attack?
Okay, I quit smoking about a decade before the heart attack. So while nicotine has been shown experimentally to be an endothelial, it causes endothelial dysfunction. So it's not a good thing. And the tarring stuff causes damage to your lungs and stuff like that, problems there. But, they, within a decade, if you're not smoking, that's to a large extent that can be ameliorated or reduced to some extent. So you shouldn't have progression. To have progression, there must be other factors. And my factors were the oxidative stress coming from seed oils and also the mitochondrial damage that was happening. So when you're trying to heal and you're impairing energy production, less energy, less ability to do work and repair. It's simple as that. It's not just having brain fog and not having sufficient energy to function. It's also less energy to repair, which is fundamental. Which means that, if you're just oxidizing your internals, but not causing any mitochondrial dysfunction, then if it wasn't severe oxidation, maybe the body could cope with repair if it had enough energy.
Yes. And also
yeah,
enough electrons as well, because people forget that
precisely.
electrons are a reducing agent. So I think that's
Precisely.
really important. Now, this is going really well. So I think it's evolving now into, you think that seed oils are the primary driver of cardiovascular disease. And this is a really, really important topic, because I haven't brought up calcium scans yet, because have you ever had one of those, and how would you
I've had a bit more of a complex scan, not a CAC scan, but one of those where they look at your heart live, where they can actually see the calcification in all parts of the heart and fibrosis and all sorts of things. So it's a more detailed analysis. It's something that a doctor will recommend, because it costs a hell of a lot more than your basic CAC score, stuff like that. CAC score also has some weaknesses in terms of the angle. If you have to be positioned in the same exact way, and usually it's good to go to a similar technician who will have used similar techniques, and so you can actually then view differences over time, because there can be they're very minor inconsistencies, but they still exist. So in order to track something properly and all that, I view CAC scores in two fashions. On the one hand, I view it as giving you an idea that there is a problem. But on the other hand, also, it can be a misdirect. What do I mean by that? If you lower inflammation and your CAC score keeps on going up, in my personal opinion, and this is where statins actually help because they calcify, what the body's doing is a protective mechanism. It's trying to stabilize atheromas or soft plaque. And so by calcifying, and I actually did statins for a period of time with coenzyme Q10 or ubiquinol, the reduced form, to because I'm being older, and that enzymatic pathway slightly sort of declines in its efficiency with age. So I sort of focused on doing that part, but at the same time, I realized that I would rather have a bit more calcification, have stable angina, rather than have unstable angina. So I was less concerned about that. And then over time, with my protocol, once I was actually happy that with the different scans that we did a couple of years later, that my things had stabilized, things that weren't progressing worse or better. At that moment, then I sort of initiated a protocol of decalcification, as I call it.
Oh, that's fascinating. Shall we dive into that? Because
yes.
I think I was going to ask you next, what would be the three things that you've done that have benefited your health the most? And if you want to sort of focus it around the calcification and your heart and this, because somebody actually asked a question on this channel about calcium on the outside of arteries and why is my CA score going up? And I think you're a great person to just say what's the three things or more you did to help and what this protocol is.
Yeah, so once I'm happy that things are stabilizing, that means, that I've done a proper scan. Because if I would say to people, the moment you realize you've got calcification with a CAC score, don't stop there. You need to know what level of calcification it is and where it is and how it's distributed. Otherwise, you're operating blind. Find out, is it in atheromas and are they stable? If they're not stable, that means you've got calcification, but it's distributed, because sometimes you can get streaks within the blood vessels for a whole lot of different reasons. High blood pressure can cause that. And so these sort of things can be mitigated with certain strategies, but this could also spread out the calcium, but also spread out. And there could be two states. If there's a lot of calcium, then it could provide some stability over time, depending on how much collagen is within that sort of atheroma. So it really has to do with that. That's why you have to do a detailed scan to work out some of this sort of stuff to find out exactly what the state of affairs is. If it's unstable, even though I consider statins as a mitochondrial poison, I would actually recommend somebody go on statins for 6 months with coenzyme Q10 for the simple purpose of rapidly calcifying and stabilizing that atheroma. Then give it about half a year after that for things, being on a carnivore diet, non-inflammatory diet, to allow the body to start healing, stabilizing. And then after that, I'd look at a rapid at decalcifying, and that's where I would use vitamin K2, especially minoquinone 4. The reason for minoquinone 4 than minoquinone 7 is that while the other minoquinones of K2 can activate osteocalcin enzymes and stuff like that, that's fine, whoopee. At the end of the day, you need to get soft tissue calcium out of the soft tissue and into the bones. And that's where vitamin K2 of the minoquinone 4 variety, which is the animal form, and even the other minoquinones, including minoquinone 7, will get converted in the liver, including K1, excess K1 that's not being used for clotting factors, will get converted to K2, to minoquinone 4. And that's the only minoquinone that can affect the genome, that can interact directly with the genetic, with your DNA. None of the other minoquinones can. And the body just sucks it all up. It's ridiculously how rapid it sucks it all up. And what it can do is, because its structure, it's like it's got a second hook, and it can actually grab onto soft calcium in the soft tissue and actually move it more efficiently out into the bones. So that's where being on an animal-based diet, where you're getting and being out in the sun and getting enough vitamin D and enough retinol, we're not talking about excess levels here, but normal, good levels, they can activate these proteins. And then minoquinone 4 can also influence the genetics, your DNA, to transcript specific types of classes, which can help with this decalcifying form. Now, my approach is, it depends on your genetics, how you administer minoquinone 4.
Okay, so just so people can catch up, because you'd know it as MK4, and you'll see it on the back of, if you buy your K2, because you can get MK7, and that's how it's written. So if people miss that, what we're talking about now is how the right dose of the right kind of vitamin K2 can help decalcify arteries, but you want to make sure that you know a bit about your genetics. And before we talk about maybe go into this deeper, what about K2 from diet? I mean, things like brie or turkey thighs or liver?
Yep,
Do you
yep.
think it's insufficient?
Yes. I actually think it's for a healthy person that's got no cardiovascular issues or whatever, perfect. It's what ancestry we would have had. As I say, if you're healthy, a young person who's healthy, you should be getting it from the diet, all these things. You do not need a supplement.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant.
So let's make this clear. What we're talking here is about people who've got underlying conditions, who've got pre-existing conditions, who have got deranged bodies with a lot of health issues and are trying to reverse these health issues. You're not going to do it with a standard dose. It's just not going to happen.
Oh, no, that's really important. What about people who eat a mixed macronutrient diet? Say if they're low carb and eat maybe 100 or 50 grams of plants a day, or people who are vegetarian, what would you say about
there's a lot of issues there in terms of K2 and a number of other sort of nutrients. Depending on the quantity of plant foods, there can be inhibitory effects in terms of certain amino acids, which are also important for health functioning and detoxification. For instance, methionine, cysteine, taurine. If you're not getting enough of these sort of things, in particular, if you're not getting enough methionine and cysteine and taurine and choline, which are in animal foods, then your primary detoxification pathways aren't going to work properly. Your methylation generally is not going to work properly. And you're also, the thing with taurine also, it has a lot of multiple functions. I was trying to hold off from going straight into taurine.
Oh, no, don't worry. I think people might we might need to backtrack a bit because they need to know that cysteine, methionine, taurine are sulfated. So these are sulfated amino acids. And
that's exactly right.
And that's part of why it's important. But exactly, I mean, I get lots of questions about taurine, and I think you're, again, so people can listen, here's somebody that knows a lot about taurine as well as a lot about K2.
Well, the thing is, the way I view taurine is as a Swiss Army knife in the body. It interacts and affects a whole lot of pathways in every single tissue type. But the key reason why I use it as my protocol on my cardiovascular issues is primarily for anti-fibrotic features that it's got. So it can actually reduce fibrosis in soft tissue, which is critical in lowering, especially when you've had like a mild heart attack and you've had some fibrosis, some damage to your heart muscle. And some people can end up with arrhythmias and stuff like that for life. Now you can reverse fibrosis. I've actually reversed all my fibrosis in my heart. And I've actually been last year I was sort of discharged from Cardiology Tasmania.
That's massive, because when I did my postdoc on statins and heart cells and heart attacks and this, that, and the other, back then the doctors would say, once you've got scar tissue in your heart and you've killed your myocytes, that's the end of that, because the fibroblasts will just infiltrate. But I don't think people realize how massive what you've just said is, because it's something that doctors think can't happen.
It's nonsense. It's nonsense. I mean, we've actually caused in rats multiple injuries in their pancreas, in their beta cells, in their kidneys, their nephrons, all sorts of tissues. We've actually deliberately caused damage to those tissues and then used high doses of taurine. And we're talking about the equivalent, let's say somebody's 70 kilos or 154 pounds. Such a person, if they were using the equivalent therapeutic dose, which is for 3 months for a rat, humans, that is equivalent to 9.83 years, so a decade. It's based on cellular turnover because of metabolic rate. You will basically turn over all your cells and actually clear out a lot of that fibrosis and damage. And that's exactly what I did over a decade. So I've been on taurine for a very long time. so I've...
Are you able to allude to dosages of taurine or K2, or is it better you prefer people to reach out to you personally?
I usually do because there are issues with genetics that I need to basically be, and I need to sort of make sure that people are doing the right thing, and if they're getting certain effects, we need to work out what it is, because sometimes, because it does have an effect on a whole lot of, like, it affects inflammasome, it regulates inflammasome in the gut and in a lot of tissue. And inflammasome is one of the key, overactive can be a problem with inflammation throughout the body. Underactive can be a problem as well, not sorting things out. So, then histamines in the gut and spermidine in the gut also can be downregulated and brought into homeostasis by taurine. It can actually improve the proton pumps in your stomach and actually also suppress H. pylori. It can improve islet cells. So if somebody's got diabetes 1, it can really help in restoring if you start early enough. Now, we have no experimental data. I know that they've deliberately harmed the islet cells of rats, and they've healed with the equivalent of a decade for humans at high doses of taurine. Now, I've had no one as a diabetic 1 to experiment for me for a decade to work out if they could actually improve that condition. But if it works in rats and other mammals, I'm sort of hopeful that it should be useful for humans as well. We are a mammal after all. And I mean, fine, diets between animals are different, but when you actually see taurine, it is pervasive throughout all species on this planet. So It's quite clear, it's not just a human. It actually is one of the most ancient molecules. Let me put it this way.
But just so people know, if they've been taking taurine and K4 as a supplement, it's perfect. It's safe. They haven't hurt themselves. What you're talking about is a higher level protocol specifically for people with heart disease, stroke, atherosclerosis, had a heart attack, lots of oxidized LDL, people who've lived a really bad life or been massively misinformed about food and got themselves in a mess. So for just general usage, what people are buying and using, that they're going to get the benefits, and it's nothing, they're not going to disrupt anything. Because I always say, people ask me all the time about doses, and I do say a lot of the time, just read the back of the bottle unless you want to do a specific protocol, and that's when you'd mega or microdose, and that's where people would need to come and speak to somebody like yourself that's really dove in deep to it, because we're going to have to wrap up soon. So I just wanted to ask you one more thing, because having a heart attack is really personal and terrifying, as is having a stroke, and you said that you nearly died, and we know that spiritual practices of any sort have benefits on health, even if you don't believe in anything. Can you share your spiritual beliefs?
I'm an Orthodox Christian.
Okay.
So that is my faith. So I get, by praying to God, that's how I'm able to give myself strength to basically persevere and keep going. And it possibly is a reason why I didn't give up. And I sort of, when I was in the hospital, I sort of cried. And when I came out of surgery, and I said to myself, I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to die. And the first night I got up and walked around and went for about a 3K walk. I know it's crazy. And I just slept like a baby after. And I was doing that while I was in cardiology. And they were actually, the nurses and doctors were trying to tell me to ease up. You just come out of major surgery. But I was feeling great. I can tell you I was feeling great. And I think I was able to get out earlier, discharged a couple of weeks earlier. I requested to be discharged. The doctor was not very happy with me wanting to discharge earlier, but I felt that and I'm not recommending this for people to do. This is not medical advice, guys. I'm just saying what I did. And psychologically, I've always been a strong person, and I don't allow things to get me down. Initially, we're all human. We're going to have a bit of a, feeling a bit sorry for ourselves, but probably 5 minutes in my case. And then after that, gun ho, I'm going to fight this. And I think that's the reason why I've got this far is it's a race for survival. In a sense, I needed to work out what went wrong and how to fix it. And so that is what motivated me, pushed me like mad to find solutions to my problems and stuff like that. And along the way, I realized that I had issues with calcium metabolism due to genetics as well. So I can't absorb, because I've got pastoral genes, I can't absorb calcium very well. And so I can have derangements in glucose metabolism as a consequence. And also, and this can also is a reason why 24% of the carnivores that have got these genetics as well can have these higher blood sugar levels that they raise. And it really means they need to be eating calcium-rich foods to get enough calcium, because they're not getting enough. And I
definitely. I think our genetic variability is massive, and that's why one size doesn't fit all.
No.
But it's been such a pleasure to talk to you for this short time, and I think people are going to want to hear more, because obviously you've got so much to share, and you've got your own YouTube channel, you've got your own links and things. I'll put them all in the description. But do you want to tell people where they can find you, where they can reach out to you, how can they hire you, and where can they get
now? Because I've got a day job, I used to do some consultancies, but I stopped doing them because I just don't have the time. I do usually recommend people like Bart Kay for general sort of stuff, Pim Johnson for things like addictions and stuff like that. And usually just ask people, just drop me an email, and when I get a chance to reply, I'll reply back and provide. In rare occasions, I do some as an ex-sufferer, I do sort of like free type consultancies or one-off for people that may have like cancer or really on death's door, so to speak. Cancer's the key one nowadays. And I do have a cancer protocol. People can go and check a whole playlist of things and a lot of information, and demystifying a lot of things that people are not well aware of.
And do you have a website, or do they just need to find you on YouTube?
Well, I do have a Facebook account, but it's a private one for family and friends only. So I don't share that out. So the only thing that I do have is a Twitter account that I pretty much hardly ever am on it. And my primary account is the YouTube one. Now I do have the Odyssey account as well, but that's very much out of date. I haven't been supporting it in recent times. I may go back to it and try and support it, but currently, if you Google Harry Serpanos YouTube, you should find me. I'm the only person with that name on YouTube.
Yeah, I'll put the link in the description for people, because we're all really lazy and we just like to click on a link. Going and finding you in Odyssey is like, and for people, there are interesting things there, but I think there's so much that I'd like to talk to you about in more depth, but I don't want people to get confused and lost, because you've already dropped so many amazing gems. And I think for people who've never met you, or people who've had a heart attack or have got heart disease, that needs to settle. And I think the main take-home thing from you would be, really, those seed oils are just worse than we can imagine, and you've reversed your heart disease, not just in the arteries but in the actual myocardium as well. So not to give up hope, and it doesn't matter, there is always something you can do to get better. Would you agree?
Yes. I would. My final words would be to people: you need to be on a species appropriate diet with people that know what they're doing to help you, guide you with a proper protocol. You may have to do genetic tests to work out certain calcium issues and certain other genes that you may have, in order to then customize if you want the best results. Now, you will get good results from the carnivore diet and some supplementations like choline and taurine and stuff like that. But if you really want to hone in on properly those sort of things, because some people can have like certain genetics which causes them certain issues with sulfur metabolism. So we
Oh
need
yeah,
to,
with genetics, there are
yeah,
20,000
yeah,
genes that can go wrong.
exactly,
So I think that we'll have to do
precisely,
another podcast all about SNPs and epigenetics and genetics,
true.
because people's heads will be exploding by now. But thank you so much for coming on at short notice,
You're
Harry. I
welcome.
really, really appreciate it.